And hello and welcome everyone to another episode of the Pumpkin Copter Cast. Today I am joined by Gregory Haynes of the AbleGamers Charity.
Yes, sir.
So yeah, we'll start off with the very basic, who you are and what you do.
All right. What's up, Tyler? And what's going on, everybody in the interwebs? My name is Greg Haynes or Gregory Haynes. That's my government name if you want to go by that. I am lead researcher at the AbleGamers Charity. What that means is that I work behind the scenes to essentially acquire some data that we can use to talk about players with disabilities. That's what the Able Gamers Charity is about. We're a charity that works to help people with disabilities play games. Due to various reasons, various forms of disabilities, both physical and mental, there are sometimes barriers that keep players from being able to play games. And the Able Gamers Charity, we're about bridging that gap. We're about bringing the games to people with disabilities and helping them so that they can game together. As lead researcher, myself and the vice president of the charity, Chris Power, we are essentially acquiring data and numbers so that we can talk about what people with disabilities need in terms of games, what they look for in terms of games, why they game, and why gaming is important to not just people with disabilities, but everybody who decides that they want to identify as a player. And that's pretty much what I do.
Okay, so you kind of answered this a bit already, but you said that the Able Gamers Charity is to help people with either physical or mental or someone with both types of disabilities who just, for reasons, can't play games with a conventional controller the way a lot of people can.
Right, right.
So, yeah, that answers that. So, just,
What's on your mind, Tyler? Talk to me, man.
I
Talk to
don't
me.
know, just, I've only now just started regularly, like, conversing with people who, like, work in various video game charities, so as someone who hasn't, like, worked for a charity, either as, like, a volunteer or as an employee, I'm not entirely sure how it works, but I saw from your website while I was bulking up on what you guys do that,
That's a good place to start. The
yep,
website, ablegamers.org.
that the charity and like all of its services are entirely funded like by private donations, and you don't have like funding from like any other source. Is that right?
Yeah, I mean, the people who drive home what Able Gamers does, they're individuals. We're not funded by the government, although we are recognized by the government as a 501c3 organization, nonprofit organization. But we're not funded by the government. It's people like you, people who hear about our mission and they say, "Hey, that strikes a chord with me," and they donate. A lot of what we do and a lot of what Able Gamers is about you know uh, creating controllers and creating ways that enable people to play games. I mean, controllers, are generally the sort of the biggest barrier for people with physical disabilities at the very least, because for whatever reason, as you said, they can't play with a conventional controller as an able-bodied person would normally be able to play. So that's not all we do, and we can definitely get into that later. As we dissect all this stuff. But I think what's important to recognize is that Able Gamers is it's funded by you. It's funded by anyone listening to this who wants to help us. It's funded by people who are willing to put forth a donation to help out people who would like to be able to game. And those donations, they go to our grant program, which is something that is funded as I said, by the individuals, and it's completely free. We don't ask people with disabilities to pay for controllers that we give them. We create customized controllers, sometimes in house, sometimes with our partners at Evil Controllers, and we that costs money to create, obviously, and that's where those donations go. But we give these controllers to people with disabilities for free. They don't pay a dime to us. We don't sell anything.
Okay. So, Greg, how did you personally come to work for AbleGamers / how long have you been working for them so far?
They kidnapped me, man. Send help. No. No, I'm originally from New York City. And Able Gamers is based out of West Virginia. Now we got people, pretty much across the world. Chris Powers, as I mentioned, our vice president, he's, in the UK. Craig Kaufman, who I'm sure I'll bring up his name a lot. He's our program director. He's in Columbus, Ohio. Steve Spone, our COO, he's based out of Pittsburgh. We've got people all over the country, but AbleGamers HQ is based out of West Virginia. So me, being a New Yorker, moving to small town West Virginia, man, I'm still shook. I still haven't gotten used to it. But what happened was, ironically, I ran into Mark Barley, the founder of AbleGamers, at PSX, PlayStation Experience. And you may think, oh, Greg, you were probably looking for a charity, looking to volunteer somewhere. That's not it at all. It was probably the most silly reason and that's the reason is I was trying to find the bathroom. I had stayed somewhere at a panel for way longer than I should have. And by that time, my body was calling me. It was like, yo, Greg, why did you stay at that panel for so long? You got to find a bathroom. So I'm walking, and at this point, I'm walking routes in, the convention center that I hadn't yet navigated. And I'm like, okay, I have no idea where the bathroom is. And my bladder's going to blow. I'm going to have a medical emergency. And, thank God I turned to my right and there's Mark Barley, founder of AbleGamers. They have, a booth there. There's a banner that says AbleGamers Charity, but that's not on my mind at all. And I'm like, yo, I don't even say, hello. I'm like, yo, you know where the bathroom is? Rudest New Yorker on planet Earth. I'm like, yo, you know where the bathroom is? And I shouted at him. And he's like, hey, would you like to learn about AbleGamers? And I'm like, sure, sir. I would love to learn about AbleGamers, but I got to use the bathroom first. So if you could point me in that direction, that would be great. And if you ever get the chance to hear Mark Barley's side of things, his opinion is that he thought I was never going to come back. And the beauty of it, the dope thing was as I was going to the bathroom, I was like, I would love to hear more about AbleGamers. So I came back, and Mark and Craig Kaufman, who was also there, they talked to me about AbleGamers, and they talked to me about the mission, about the fact that they want to help people with disabilities, to foster communities, inclusive communities, to bring people together, to let them have, to help them have a social experience through gaming, like I've had, Mark has had, Craig has had, so many players out there have had, and it resonated with me. And Mark and Craig, they invited me to dinner that night. They were like, hey, I had a background in psychology, and they were interested in that. They were actually looking to expand their research aspect, and me with my interest in psychology, and also, wanting to learn more about AbleGamers. They were like, hey, let's go out to dinner. And, it's kind of crazy because they didn't know me. I didn't know these people. It's not like we talked all day. We talked for maybe 20 minutes. And, that night we go out to dinner and we get to talking. And I realized that what I was looking for is a situation where I can help people with my background in psychology, where I can put my hands into something that allows me to bring my research expertise, but also my experience being a player for 28 years. I'm 20 years old. I've been gaming for as long as I can remember. And, it seemed like I suited that need for them, where they wanted to expand into the research aspect of things. And before you know it, they invited me out to come out to AbleGamers HQ. And, it's all history from there. I moved out to West Virginia, left New York behind, all that good food and easy transportation gone. I traded it for trees and grass, and the awesome mission that AbleGamers has. So that's pretty much how it started. I could tell a lot more, but that's how it began.
Okay then. So, like, how was like Able Gamers founded? Like, how did the founder turn it from what it started as to, the charity that's, widely known in a lot of gamer circles that it is today?
It's funny that you say, it's widely known in gaming circles today. And, I definitely feel like, we've made a lot of strides towards becoming sort of a household name, so to speak, where, people, in and around the gaming industry are aware of us. But we've been around for a long time.
Yeah,
2018 now. The charity was founded back in 2004.
yeah.
So, our founder, Mark Barley, he had a friend who had multiple sclerosis, and I'm sure he could tell the story a lot better than me. And he probably tug at your heartstrings to the point where you're crying and it's all emotional. Because when he told me, I was like, "Oh my God, Mark, that's great, that's awesome." But he had a friend who had multiple sclerosis, and one day they were trying to play games together, and she couldn't hold her mouse because the nature of that disability, that disease, is that it impairs your motor functioning over time. And Mark bonded with this friend over playing games, and that's something that was a ritual for them. And then all of a sudden, one day, his friend can't play, and they go online and they go on Yahoo.com because that's back in the day, 2004. Yahoo.com was still popping. They went on Yahoo and they were trying to find out, how can we find a way to work around this? How can we find a way to game? And Mark found that there wasn't many answers out there. Mark and his friend found out that there wasn't many answers out there. So, long story short, Mark decided, why don't I make something? Why don't I create something that helps other people who are guaranteed to be having this problem out there? Why don't we find a way to make something that can help them? Because of this very personal event that happened. It was very sad and detrimental to their experience together. So he created AbleGamers because he had in mind that there's got to be other people that have questions about how they can, get past the physical limitation in order to game like they normally do. So that was way back in 2004. The organization officially became a 501c3 nonprofit organization in 2009. So yeah, that's pretty much how I got started.
Okay. And we went into this a bit earlier, but, if you were having, like, really intense discussion with someone who wanted to know about all the, like, inner workings. Yeah. The meat and potatoes of the game, like, how does, like, the charity work on, like, a surface level and also, like, the intense, like, business type level that most people who don't work there don't get to see?
It's interesting that you said, business level, because, when it comes to something, organization like this, I would love to just tell you about, the awesome experiences we have interacting with people and meeting people and effectively changing, their lives, giving them a means to play games and sort of experience something that either they love or they've been missing out on for, a good portion of their lives. And I'd love to only talk about that, but there is a business side of it as well, because as I said before, everything, things require money. Everything needs money to be able to be done. I would love to say that people would create customized controllers out of the kindness of their hearts, but unfortunately, it's not just about that. People need money to do things. That's just the way the world works. Thank capitalism. So one of the aspects of AbleGamers is our grant program, as I described before. So our grant program is basically people apply to these grants in which we will then consult with them and figure out what their needs are. We find out about their specific disability. We find out what are some of the barriers that are inhibiting them from being able to play games, the conventional way. And sometimes we bring them into our HQ if they can't make it out to West Virginia, which is understandable. We try to garner as much information as we can via phone, via conference calls, basically remotely. And then once we have what information we have about the disability, we try to get to work creating a controller or finding a controller that already exists to sort of give them the best situation to game, the best physical situation to game. And like I said, I'm mentioning a lot of physical disabilities, and I'm gonna get to sort of that mental aspect in just a second.
Mm-hmm.
But a lot of what we see is physical disabilities, and sometimes we make these controllers in-house. We have a great R&D situation with Jessie Hawk. She is the person who heads up like our development division, our research and development, if you will. And she will work hard to create controllers or find controllers, or will work with a company called Evil Controllers to create a controller that can work best for the person. And then we also have to find accessories that they may need to work with whatever controllers we give them. So the Xbox adaptive controller, that's something that came out recently. A lot of people don't understand what it is, but it's something that can allow players to plug in many different switches and different peripherals that can serve as sort of replacements for buttons that you'd find on a conventional controller. So part of the grant program is sometimes finding those peripherals, those accessories that will then go with the controller, or sometimes it's just the accessories that we're giving to the person, and it'll all be freely given to the person who applies to our grant program. I can't reiterate enough that this is something that is completely free. The person that applies for this grant is just getting a controller from us. And that's what it's about. Steve Spohn, our COO, he always says that we're the only organization that actually wants to be put out of business. Ideally we'd want everyone to be able to have a controller to game. As I said, there's a business side of it. So, it's not always feasible. But that's the goal, and that's why we keep working towards that. We also have expansion packs that are essentially large assemblages of accessible technology that we'll bring to like a hospital, let's say, or a care center, and we will set up that care center or a hospital with an accessible setup. We'll give them controllers, we'll give them peripherals that they can use with the people there, the kids or teenagers, whoever it may be, who are there, so that they can play games. So our expansion packs, and that's something that is something we got off the ground fairly recently. Mm-hmm. And it's a beautiful thing to be able to go out somewhere and literally just lay out a whole situation that allows people to play games. And then lastly, you have my aspect of things, which is the sort of the research division, and we have this awesome program called Player Panels. So, Player Panels is an assemblage of people with disabilities who have signed up to this program, giving us tons of information about what disabilities they have, what games they play, with the goal of connecting these players with developers and organizations that need to learn about what players with disabilities need in order to create their games and make whatever technology needs to be made in order to create this more accessible environment that we want so much. The thing that I take pride in with Player Panels is that we're collecting this information, but we are protecting the players. We're not giving information to random developers like, Dave Johnson in Canada has this disability and you need to make your game for him. We are providing information only when the players want us to, and we are connecting these players with these organizations, as a mediator of sorts. So players will get compensated for their time. They'll be accredited for, let's say, testing a game or filling out a survey for a company to, get more information or give more information about what that company may need to make their games more accessible. So player panels is a big thing that I think we've started and is, I mean, that we have, practically, I think we have about 300 active players right now, and it's growing all the time. And they're so responsive to the service and the information that we're trying to get out there. So, all these aspects come together to sort of garner information that we can then use to uh, advocate for a more accessible realm, an accessible gaming community. We are in touch with developers. Obviously some of this is NDA. A lot of it is NDA, so I can't name specifics. But we work with developers to make to make games more accessible, to be advocates, to be a voice for gamers out there who have disabilities and are unable to game. And when it comes to the gaming situation and how games are created, there's a notion that there are players with disabilities that are forgotten, and they're being left out of an experience to socialize and to have positive gaming experiences. And we serve as advocates. We serve as a voice for those people out there. I'd like to think, at least.
Okay then. So next up, like, how does the I know one of the answers to this ever since I started going to them regularly, I always see at least either just outside of or on the convention floor a booth or a fundraising type thing for AbleGamers at a PAX, but how the day-to-day goings-ons, how does the charity promote itself, and what do you do to raise awareness about its cause to someone who is just learning about it just now?
Yeah, I mean, so a lot of what we do is social media based. So we're on Twitter at AbleGamers if you want to follow us there. We also have a very active community on Facebook, on Facebook.com/AbleGamers. And the last part of it, is us creating video content. That's actually something I'm going to be doing as well. I've already, started. You're going to see some videos dropping in the next couple weeks. And I'm, definitely part of that, along with Joe Kelso, who's also involved with video production as well. But it's largely social media based. So as I said, Twitter, Facebook, YouTube. We're attending conventions often throughout the year. I mean, we attend multiple conventions. PAX East, PAX West, PSX, GDC. We are out there, and there's a good chance that if there's a larger gaming convention, that's going on right now, there's a good chance you'll find us there. The social media outreach is so important, and retweets and the likes and the comments we get, it's so important because, as I said, being funded by individuals, it's important that we can reach as many people as we can. And I think that outreach via these social media platforms, I mean, let's be honest, that's the way most of us communicate. You know what I mean? That's the way, especially in the gaming community. I mean, that's the way most of us are able to talk about our favorite games and learn about our favorite games. It's through social media. So I would say that's the biggest way we promote ourselves. Obviously, there are times where news outlet will contact us for interview. Podcasts like yours, you being so awesome to hit us up and be like, hey, I'd love to hear about AbleGamers. That is so helpful to the cause. So I wish we could get 1 million podcast interviews. We probably couldn't do them all, but just being able to reach out in that way, and podcasting, of course, is part of social media outreach, or at least I think of it that way. So people like yourself who are interested in learning about us, that's the best way, is word of mouth.
Yeah. And even though I've been doing this for a fair bit, always surprised. Like, I'm honestly surprised whenever a dev or a video game style organization actually responds. Probably considering I only have like literally 9 subscribers, and few of my videos ever break double digits. So it's just, I don't know.
We all got to start somewhere, man. We all
Yeah,
got to start somewhere. Like I just finished telling you that this organization has been around since 2004, and I'm pretty sure that in 2004, nobody knew about Able Gamers, but it started with one person, two people, and it grows. That same can be said for your podcast.
yeah. Here's
Uh,
hoping.
I I'm with you on that, man.
So yeah. So here's my favorite question, and the question that absolutely none of my guests have ever struggled to form an answer for, and everyone always knows exactly what I mean when I ask it. So, number 7 on the docket. In your professional opinion as a video game style person, is video games?
Yes, of course.
All right then.
100%.
Yep. So, yep. Next up, um, I, I've heard talks about this on the Twitters and various online video game magazines like Kotaku or Polygon or Destructoid. This is not sponsored. Please don't sue me about the. And when I really started hearing
Don't sue me
about,
either, I guess.
yeah, and I really started hearing like more about this. Like the most I heard about this was during E3. And for those who don't know what I'm saying words about, I'm talking about the recently released and made available to the general public the Xbox Adaptive Controller. Now, as someone who's horrible with technology, maybe you can inform me a bit, like what the Xbox Adaptive Controller is, and like how it works, and why a lot of people like Able Gamers are like singing its praises as a gaming device for those who can't game conventionally.
That's a good question. That's not the first time I've seen that question pop up because, for a lot of people who look at the Xbox adaptive controller, they're just like, well, I have a controller. This is a square brick that has some big buttons on it. I don't know what it does. But I think the beauty of the Xbox adaptive controller is the fact that you you can you can connect it to your Xbox and you can connect different I use this word a lot, peripherals, which are just like different buttons or different switches that you can connect to the Xbox adaptive controller, and cumulatively those switches, based on whatever your personal preference is, can connect to the Xbox adaptive controller and thus the Xbox One, and the Xbox One will recognize the Xbox adaptive controller along with all those switches as just a regular Xbox One controller. You can remap whatever buttons you want to remap to whatever switches you want to remap to. So let's say, for example, we have somebody with a physical disability that limits how hard they can press on a button.
Mm-hmm.
So we have light touch switches that can be connected to the Xbox Xbox adaptive controller, where a light tap of this pad will register as a button press. Now, for someone who may have difficulty pressing a button on a regular Xbox One controller, this light touch pad might be, a godsend. And let's say they want to connect a bunch of light touch pads to the Xbox adaptive controller, they can then have a bunch of buttons that respond to light touch. So the beauty of the Xbox adaptive controller is that's just one situation. And there are multiple situations that can be applied to the Xbox adaptive controller. Let's say you have an upper limb disability and you can only use your feet. Maybe you can connect a peripheral that you can put on the ground and you can use your foot now to press right trigger to shoot. in a shooter. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
So like the idea behind the Xbox adaptive controller is that games are, playability is no longer limited to this controller that has to be held by two hands. You know, if you think about holding a controller, whether it's whatever brand, Xbox or PlayStation 4, think about how many fingers are actually used just to hold the controller. You're using the majority of your fingers just to hold the controller.
Hmm.
And for people with physical disabilities in particular, you know, uh, sometimes the digits aren't available. Sometimes, there are limb disabilities that, once again, don't allow for the hand strength. The Xbox adaptive controller alone, just by being able to put it on a flat surface, you no longer have to hold a controller. And now you can press whatever buttons you need in order to game. So, we've been working, in secret with Xbox for, for just about 3 years. We were under, NDA. We couldn't say anything. Obviously, I've been with the organization for 3 years. I've been with them for about, I officially signed on in January. So I've been with them for, pretty much just half the year. And they've been working on the Xbox adaptive controller for way before that. We couldn't say anything about it, obviously. But I think the cool thing about the adaptive controller is that price point. For $99, if you're not familiar with assistive technology, it's typically expensive.
Hmm.
Um, because generally speaking, there is a high demand for it. There are many people with disabilities, and there's generally a low supply because, to be honest, people with disabilities, when it comes to the gaming experience, is somewhat marginalized. So with that low supply, they tend to be more expensive. And with disabilities, the cost of just living costs alone are already high. So it's difficult to pay a lot of money. And you may scoff at $99 controller, or you may think that's a lot, compared to a $60 controller that an able-bodied person would be able to use. But comparatively speaking, we had something that we call the Droid. It is essentially a box that can connect to Xbox consoles and trick the Xbox into thinking that this Adroit is an Xbox 360 controller. And a lot like the Xbox adaptive controller, you could plug different switches into the Adroit, and you can create your own sort of button layout by doing that. Now the Adroit cost $400 just for the box, just for the box that you can plug your switches into. Just for that was $400 alone, and that's not even including all those switches I described to you. That's going to jack up the price. But when you look at the Xbox adaptive controller, it's $99. Yes, you're going to have to pay for the switches as well, but it's literally one fourth the cost of something that we had created that can do virtually the same thing. So like let's say we have a $400 grant. We're just talking about $400 that we've been given to you by yourself. Let's say you give us $400 as a donation, and we had a grant to fulfill. Prior to the Xbox adaptive controller's release, we'd only be able to fulfill one Adroit controller, one of those boxes. Whereas with the adaptive controller, $99, we can give out four of those. Like, that's how much of a game changer the Xbox adaptive controller is. And I think that's the big thing that if you're not in need of it, or if you're not reading up on all these articles that are coming out, which admittedly is a lot, that's the beauty of it. That's the beauty of the Xbox adaptive controller. And I think it's great, man. Like, kudos to Xbox for recognizing that. It's a big step forward. It's a big victory for the community. It's a huge victory for players with disabilities. And I think it's amazing that Bryce Johnson over at Xbox, he worked so diligently. He's their accessibility guy over at Xbox, and he worked so diligently to put this out there. So shout outs to him for being a champion for the cause, being an ally for the cause.
Okay. So, moving on from that, is there anything you'd like to see the gaming companies, and by gaming companies I'm talking like the big ones like Sony, Ubisoft, however you say it, Microsoft or Nintendo, are there anything you'd like to see like the big gaming companies out there either do or like do more of in terms of like making gaming more accessible to like groups of people that it traditionally isn't accessible for?
Sure, sure. You know, one thing that sort of saddens me is the fact that in the game development process, gamers with disabilities, players with disabilities aren't often given a voice. There are games that are being made where if there's a problem with the game that excludes players with disabilities or has barriers for players with disabilities for playing the game, it's sort of solved after the fact. Uh, sometimes it's not even solved after the fact. Like quick time events, which are a huge restrictor for players with limited mobility. Like those problems sometimes aren't fixed. Sometimes a game like, let's say, God of War, for example, there was an issue with subtitles being too small, and they after the fact they implemented the ability to, I think they increased the size of their text, of their subtitle text. And I would love for developers and companies to bring players with disabilities in to talk to them about their needs, talk to them about what they want to see with games, and let them go through the quality assurance testing process so that their voices can be heard. I consider myself an ally of the disability community, but as someone who identifies as able-bodied, although I have had experiences, I had an experience where I had to do rehab on my ankles for a year and a half. Like, so I understand what it, to a limited extent, what it means to sort of have, a limitation. And through that sort of opens my mind about, wow, you must be experiencing something way harder to deal with. I consider myself an ally because of that type of thought process. But gamers with disabilities, players with disabilities need their own voice. They need to be able to speak up. They need to be heard. So I would love for these companies to bring in players with disabilities and have them be heard. I would love them I would love for them to speak to the advocates within the disability community to bring them in, talk to them about what they need, convene with them. Just like you have, testing. Of course, there are game testers out there. Start bringing in people with disabilities, and that's what Player Panels is hoping to do in the future. That program we're hoping to link our players with these companies in order to do that, to give them a voice. As I said, it saddens me that that's the situation right now, but I'm so glad that seems to be changing. I think that we are changing the narrative in the industry, and I think companies and multiple companies spoke about this, especially at E3. I mean, you heard EA speak about it during their conference with Andrew Wilson, where he talked about creating an inclusive gaming environment, and you hear that word a lot in the gaming industry. And in order for us to do that for the disability community, for the disabled community, we need to give people within that community a voice. We need to listen.
All right, then. Very well put.
Thanks.
So, I don't know if like at a convention like PAX, if there's like if AbleGamers had a charity, I'm not a charity, it is a charity. If it had a panel, with its various staffers on it, and someone were to take the mic and like ask you why you specifically think that AbleGamers is an important thing to have and to exist, like in general, how would you respond?
For me personally, as a black male, in America, in the United States, considering the history of this country, I know what it's like to be marginalized. I know what it's like to be forgotten in some senses. I know what it's like to be left out of an experience. And I think for an organization like Able Gamers, they're speaking up for a group that's often a minority group that's often not spoken for, not advocated, in various spaces. And when I say spoken for, I don't mean that Able Gamers wants to speak up disability community, or all people that identify as disabled. What I mean is that we are here to make sure that they are recognized. And I think the importance of an organization like Able Gamers is that, in creating, for example, the adroit that I mentioned, and working with Xbox to create the adaptive controller, we're here and we're listening. Player panels, assembling, players with disabilities. That's something that we haven't really seen in this industry before. And I'd like to think that we're leaders in terms of advocacy for the disability community. I'd like to think that we say, hey, look over here. Look at all these people over here that you're not thinking about. And we're not afraid to do that. We're not afraid to shout out the people that aren't, that need to turn around and look at all the people they're leaving out. And I think that Able Gamers, on another level, just being able to communicate on a one-on-one basis through, interactions and consultations, and giving people something that allows them to play games. I think that's incredibly important. I think it's incredibly important to take into consideration each individual's needs, each individual's preferences, and their needs, and taking that into consideration and showing them that they can do something that maybe other people told them they couldn't. And I think that's one of the dopest things about Able Gamers. I think the fact that we're able to speak up, and the growth that we've experienced in just the past couple years. I mean, it's amazing. And I think the industry is starting to I genuinely think the industry is starting to realize that accessibility is important. You have Naughty Dog trying to include accessibility options in the latest Uncharted games, Uncharted 4 and Uncharted Lost Legacy. You have Sony including button remapping on their PlayStation console. You have Xbox, creating the Xbox adaptive controller. It's there. People are recognizing that. You see colorblind mode popping up in a lot of games. And, I talked a little bit before about, cognitive or mental disabilities as well. And there are organizations that, for example, are giving you the option. There are devs that are giving you the option to turn gore off. Look at Gears of War. You're able to turn the gore off in that game. I mean, you have been for years, but something like that you may think is small, but for someone who, let's say they're a veteran and they have PTSD, they could see gore on the screen and it could affect them in a way that you and I may not be able to understand, depending on whatever mental disabilities you and I may or may not have. And I think the important thing, the awesome thing, is that the industry is growing. The industry is learning, but we still have a long way to go. Mm-hmm. Still have a long way to go. And like I said, it'll be a dope day when Able Gamers can just disband, because everybody can game. Everyone can game. Everyone who has a disability, no matter what, can play a game. That'll be an awesome day.
Yeah.
I'll lose my job, but hey, this is what I signed up for, man. I'll find something else. I that's what I signed up for. And unfortunately, I know it's a very idealistic way to look at it. Unfortunately, it's going to be an uphill battle, and it may never happen. But we're going to keep trying. And AbleGamers is going to be around until we can make sure that we're heard, that the community is able to expand to include players with disabilities, man. That's the goal.
Okay. To wrap things up, what are some of AbleGamers' goals going forward?
So going forward, as I stated earlier, I'm also involved in the video content side of things. So we want to start cranking out more video content. The vast majority of media within the the video game space is video content. So we're working on stuff that I said earlier that you'll see coming out in the coming weeks. We want to start working on video content to provide some educational material, so that we can sort of show people what sort of things are out there in terms of allowing them to game, what type of accessibility options are out there, what type of, for example, I mentioned like Sony's button remapping. That's something that a lot of people don't know how to access. So we want to bring awareness to that through our video content. And we hope to continue putting that out there and to ramp that up as time goes forward. And you'll start seeing that work crank out soon. We also, I'd also like for us to be able to have the bandwidth to cover all of our grant applications that we get. Right now, our grant queue is about 6 to 7 months. That's a long wait. We would love for that wait to be shortened a great deal. Someone has to wait 6 or 7 months, not necessarily because we don't have the funds. Obviously we can't cater to everybody. So we may have the funds to fulfill a grant and create a controller for somebody, but between consultations and sometimes getting our third party materials together to build these controllers, it takes time. And I would love to say that we can make it in a week or a month, but it's just not the reality right now. So we'd love to continue to grow. I mean, just adding people that can sort of decrease that time and maybe crank out some grants faster. We would love for our names to get out there a little bit more, so that we can bring in more donations. And donations means bringing on people that can help us fulfill these grants, help us create these controllers. It also means fulfilling more grants over time, because as I said, it costs money, and that's the business side of things. Obviously being involved heavily in the research side of things, I would love to get more studies started to start understanding how developers approach game development, how people with disabilities experience the gameplay, and what makes their experience unique. And the research side of things, just learning more about the community and learning more about the development space, that's going to be able to help us bridge the gap and relay that information to the community, so that we can create games that allow everyone to be able to game, allow everyone to have access. I think those are some of our main goals right now. Also, I would love to start doing more expansion packs around the country. We would love to be able to establish, those those gaming bundles that we can give to care centers in order to provide an environment where people can be in a care setting and still enjoy gameplay, still have fun, still commune. One of our biggest things is fostering that inclusive community, and by being able to put things like that out there, that's how we're going to keep growing, man. That's how we're going to keep growing this beautiful thing that we call the gaming industry, man, the gaming space. So for AbleGamers, I would say those are definitely some goals that we have going forward.
Okay. And before we close things down, if you don't mind, I'd like to spring a question that just popped up to my brain as we were going on about all this. Something you obviously can't help noticing the more you pay attention to the world of video games, especially since I've been going to more and more PAX, is I've noticed there are quite a few video game themed charities. There's PAX's Child's Play, almost forgot the word. There's the charity that works with Boston Children's Hospital, Extra Life. There's Stack Up, which provides various which uses gaming to provide various services for like current and active duty service members, and then there's the Able Gamers, which provide which allows people who, in a less ideal world, be unable to like play games to like be able to have that gaming experience. So like what is it about? What do you think it is about video games that draws like all these different types of charitable organizations to them to like use video games in order to like raise funds and awareness for like various good causes?
I think video games, they're fun. We have such awesome experiences with video games, and I think that video games have touched. I know they touched myself in a way that's changed my life, and I know for a lot of people, gaming sort of serves as a way to experience that, and also sometimes an escape from the reality of a situation. One of the things that I'm super interested in is coping and well-being and stress management. And I think video games are often a source for that. And I think because of that connection, that entertainment value, that interactive entertainment value that video games have, I think it's so useful to our our survival, our comfort levels in terms of just having free time and indulging in something that we enjoy. And I think that it makes us feel more comfortable. It makes us feel more relaxed. That doesn't mean you're not gonna rage quit playing a game, because I know I've done that.
Mm-hmm.
But I think largely the games draw us together. I think games draw us in. They pull us in to be able to experience a narrative that we spend hours playing through. I think it forms a connection with us. I think with the gaming community, uh, there's such a close relationship between developers and the people who consume the games, and I think and the media as well. Content creators. I think the gaming industry is unique in that all of those arenas communicate with each other, and it creates this environment where you feel like you have an impact on something. You feel like you can contribute to something. Only in the gaming space can a game come out and the developer will be like, "Hey gamers, hey players, hey people playing this game, talk to me about this game. I need to fix it if there's problems." And they'll get that feedback and immediately be able to go to work affecting that change. So for video games, I think it brings us together in a way that few other forms of media do. And through that, I think that, all these organizations see that. They recognize that about video games. They recognize that, games draw us together. They recognize that relationships can be forged through games. I've made friends just by playing games. I've made like friends that I consider to be friends, man. Like not like, hey, buddy, I see you every day and I say what's up. I mean, I talk to you and we've had conversations about life. And I think games appeal to people in that sense. I think they appeal to our sense of community and communion. And I think these charities recognize that. I think these organizations recognize that. We certainly do. I mean, as I said at the beginning of this, of us talking, this charity was literally formed on exactly what I talked about. One person not being able to play a game with another person, not being able to experience that communion, not being able to have fun and relax and bond with somebody, something that was considered to be cathartic for both Mark Barley and his friend. And that's how this organization started, because something got in the way of that. So when I look at all these organizations that are trying to make the gaming space more inclusive, I think that's what brings us in, among other many things. But for me, that's sort of what I think about the most.
Yeah. Okay then. That was just to add my 2 cents in like what you said about forming actual friendships with people whom you initially only gamed with. I can 110% agree with and attest to that because I remember sometime back in the early 2010s, there's this one show that's still going real strong to this day on the internet's Video Games Awesome, and as it started to grow more of a welcoming community, I wondered what it'd be like if I joined it. And then, Fraser Agar, the creator and one of the main hosts of the show, back in the day, and sometime in the future after he's done with his move, he'd always have a meetup with PAX and be like, he knows a bunch of people who watch his show also go to PAX, and be like, hey, if you want to go to PAX and you want to meet us, we'll be here. And I swear I'm getting to a point, but I managed to I followed that show for quite a while up to that point, and then back in 2013, which was also the year I started going to PAXs, I was following notices, finding out where they're going to meet up. And just when I was almost had to go home and thought, I wouldn't be able to see them after looking for them for almost a whole day, I see a gathering near the Fangamer booth, and I realize it's Fraser and Becky, his wife and co-host, and Kyle, Deacon, and Ben, who are also three of the semi-regular co-hosts, and a bunch of people in the Video Games Awesome community who normally I only talk through Skype and now Discord. Those people I usually only talk to through Skype and Discord and game and TF2 and Minecraft. The first time I met them, after you get through that 1 to 2 minutes of awkwardness trying to connect a voice with a face. It was the people I had become friends with only on the internet, and then years later meeting them in person. It's amazing how effortless it was. Whenever we meet up, even though I usually only get to see them in person once a year at most, whenever we meet up, it's like we've been next door neighbors for decades, and that for me is one of the many reasons why video games is practically a part of my blood.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean that is an experience that, I mean, dude, I've heard so many people tell stories like that. It's happened to me where, I mean, one of my good friends, we used to talk all the time. We knew each other for years, and last year at E3, I just happened, we met each other for the first time, but it didn't feel like we met each other for the first time. We knew each other.
Mm-hmm.
Didn't matter that we didn't see each other's faces. Because we bonded in a way just by playing games and interacting on Twitter and cracking jokes with one of each other. We knew each other in that sense, and I think the gaming community is unique in that respect because that happens on such a large scale. There's so many people that have that experience. We and at PAXs, sometimes we throw PAX parties as well. And it's just a place where everybody gets to meet each other. Everybody gets to say, hey, man, really love what you do. Hey, man, I've seen your videos. I've seen your streams. I've seen this or that. And I really love what you do. And that's because we love that experience. We love that sense of seeing somebody, that we only see X amount of times a year because we only see them at events. That's the beauty of who we are as people who play games. And, as I said, I mean, there's even been times where you meet a dev and you just get the chance to tell a dev, how much their game has had a profound impact on you. That's an amazing thing. And I honestly think that's, somewhat unique to the gaming space. The only comparable medium that has such a sizable consumer base is probably the movie industry, which the gaming industry has surpassed in terms of gross and monetary, accounts and records. And but in the movie space, I can't run up to Mark Hamill and be like, "Hey, man, you changed my life with Star Wars." I'm not. There's a good chance I'll never see Mark Hamill, but with at gaming conventions, I could see some. I've run into Cliff Blazinski at a gaming convention, and been able to say, "Hey, man, Gears is great," and I think that's the beauty of the gaming industry, and just what you described. I mean, that's happened to me. It's happened to so many people I know, and to tie that back into the what Able Gamers does. I mean, dude, gamers with disabilities who aren't able to play games, they don't get that experience. They're missing out on it by not being able to play a game. And if we can bridge that gap, why wouldn't we? To me, it's simple math. What I mean, quick maths, if you will. It's simple, and I think that opening the door to welcome in a whole group of people that may not be able to play games, or they have some things that limit their experience. I think that's awesome. You know, um, I didn't bring this up before, but games can also have a therapeutic effect for various learning disabilities as well, where games can sort of exercise cognitive muscles and help people with those cognitive or mental disabilities that I spoke about. And I think that the benefits of gaming are so great in that respect. We recently saw the World Health Organization uh, classify gaming disorder as something of an actual a medical diagnosis, and a lot of people panicked about it. And there is, I understand that, but I think something like that also opens up the conversation. It draws people into to jump into the research field, like I have, to sort of find out the benefits of gaming, which are documented research wise. There are definitely benefits to playing games: the community aspect, the cognitive functioning aspect, the problem solving aspect of games, the physical therapy side of games, with VR and augmented reality. There's so many benefits to playing video games, and that's my focus. That's our focus, is to open up the world, open up that door for so many people who may not get that opportunity to walk right in and join us in that experience.
Yeah. And with that, this particular episode of the Pumpkin Copter Cast has come to a close. I would like to thank Greg from AbleGamers for entertaining the fantasies of a crazy person and being on the show, and to the -7 people who listen to this, if you're at all even vaguely interested in Able Gamers, there will be a link in the description. And yeah, if you enjoyed this video, like, rate, comment, subscribe. It really helps me out on those rare times I post anything worth reading. You can follow me on the Twitters at tgorman83, and like you've said, social media is a big thing, so follow Able Gamers on the Twitters too. And yep, this has been tgorman83, and I will see you next time.
Thanks for having me.